Hello and welcome to another edition of Community Tapestry. My name is Napoleon Bell and I'm the Executive Director with the City of Columbus Community Relations Commission, and I'd like to welcome to my left
Toni Bell. It's good to be here with you again.
Oh, it's a great time, but it is a little chilly outside.
It is chilly outside, and while it slows most people in most things, in the plight of the City of Columbus and other organizations helping people, the work has not slowed.
It does have to continue on, you know, but I still wish it was like sunny and 80 degrees.
Well, you know, if it was easy, everybody would do it. So
that is true. So on with the hard work.
yeah, let's talk about these two guests we have that came here to do some really important work.
We have some great guests that are doing great work here in the city, but also affecting and impacting positively so many lives, especially our veterans that are returning home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so we have so many of those that are coming home now, and we want to have to make sure that we take care of them. So I would like to get started then with our guests, and to my left, we have Eric Kazmierzak, and he's the Director of Operations of Resurrecting Lives Foundation. I'd like to welcome you to the program.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. And so, and on my right here, we have
a very
familiar face. If you work with the city at all, our ADA and Veteran Affairs Coordinator, Rick Isbell.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So glad to have both of you here, and you know, and talk about the work that you're doing, you know, with our veterans, but also about an issue that has affected and impacted so many of our veterans that are returning home now, and that's with PTSD and also TBI. And so let's first of all give our viewing audience a little bit of the information, a definition of what exactly that is. You know, this might be new to someone. So I'm going to turn to Eric first here. What is PTSD and also this newer to me term, TBI?
Post-traumatic stress disorder or traumatic brain injury. Traumatic brain injury is usually caused by an explosion or a blast. In most cases, especially with the veteran side of the house, although it does affect the civilian sector also. I was kind of a strange case because I had a stroke, which then onsetted with a traumatic brain injury. So there, you know, I didn't have a blast or anything like that affected me. It was more of a medical type condition that caused that traumatic brain injury.
So traumatic brain injury is deeper than a concussion. A concussion is usually the surface wound. Tell us a little bit more about what a traumatic brain injury, what happens with it?
A traumatic brain injury is really going to be caused by you know, by that energy from that blast that, you know, surges through the brain and actually kills or damages cells that are actually in the, you know, that are in the brain.
Okay.
So that's where the traumatic brain injury is caused from.
So different from a concussion. A concussion just bruises and there's recovery, but in traumatic brain injury, there's permanent damage.
Right. And in your brain, from what I understand, and again, I'm not a doctor, but I do work closely with a doctor. From what I understand, though, you know, these cells and things like that do die. You know, your brain can actually you know, utilize other systems or other parts of the brain to overcome and adapt to those injuries.
Now,
Right.
And we're glad you survived.
In certain situations, there's like scar tissue inside your brain because it sloshes around in there, and once it concuss or you hit your head, and it causes that scar tissue, you can actually grow other ways around that scar tissue to get to your memories or to get, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
well, so let me ask you this, because you talk about blasts, and I'm sure in war you hear a lot of that, and you're close to a lot of that, even ones that are shells or whatever that's coming in, but also I imagine being next to something that is shooting the shells and what have you because of those type of blasts. Is PTSD and TBI, is that something that's pretty common with our armed forces and our veterans?
The TBI, post-traumatic stress disorder, it tends to happen a lot with the veterans. I mean, let's face it, especially like where I came from, the infantry side of the house, you're always around, you know, explosives. Even going through training, you know, you've got blast, you're on the firing range, you're constantly around, you know, loud equipment, riding around in heavy equipment, and things like this. So there, you know, there are times, even in training, where you can have issues with these, you know, with the traumatic brain injury, post-traumatic stress disorder.
And with stress disorder, it could come from any place. It could be your best friend just was shot, or you witnessed a woman and her child injured, or you can't get to someone in time to help them out. This is all part of a memory that sticks in your mind, and it could be the first thing along the lines that you come to. So you're always reliving that moment, and it causes people to go into depression or do things to themselves in order to get past it.
What are the symptoms of PTSD? Because I'm really wondering if it is obvious. You know, can you just look at a person and go, oh, you've got PTSD, or does it take a while to figure out that that's what's going on?
In some cases. Yeah, that's a wishy-washy way to say it. Some people you can look at and say, yeah, that guy or gal has PTSD.
Because PTSD used to be known as shell shock.
Right.
And so those really obvious symptoms of the eyes blinking and jittery movements.
Right. The 100-mile stare or 1,000-mile stare. Yeah.
What do we notice? What do we need to be aware of? Because it seems like the challenge of PTSD is much deeper than we realize.
Right, and it gets worse with time. And so
How
perhaps
so?
when you come back, it's the honeymoon time. Everybody's, hey, you're back, it's wonderful, welcome back to the world. And then as you go along, the symptoms get worse and worse. And so the honeymoon's over, you're supposed to go back to a regular world, and you don't quite fit in. And you're still, part of you's back in another country, fighting a war over and over again in your head. And you're still paranoid, or you're still worried about your safety or your family's safety, or the buddy that you left behind because you didn't get to finish what you were doing. And I don't want to.
Well, in post-traumatic stress disorder, I mean, let's face it. This is a safety mechanism that your brain has initiated. You know, I've heard a story about, you know, a veteran that was walking to the chow hall with another veteran, and you know, the kid literally bent over to tie a shoe, and an RPG came through and killed the kid on his left. You know, wow. Well, his post-traumatic stress disorder is the fact that he survived. You know, this instinctive measure now that he's constantly living through is what saved his life, which is post-traumatic stress disorder. This is a safety mechanism that our body has put out there.
So it sounds like you have two separate pieces here. You have PTSD, which can happen just from an event, but then the TBI is the actual concussion, in a sense, of whether it be grenades or explosion. The traumatic brain injury is something that your brain is physically injured.
Right. The TBI, your brain is literally affected. You know, in my case, you know, I had trouble remembering names. I had trouble talking. I had trouble speaking, and I had to literally relearn these things over again. You know, my brain was affected in a way that I couldn't function like I normally did, and my brain literally had to relearn how to do those things again. So yeah, TBI literally affects the function, I guess the function of your brain. Right. would be a good way to say it. Whereas post-traumatic stress disorder is going to be more of a reactionary type deal.
So now that we've talked about what PTSD and what TBI are, let's talk about some of the things that you do in your respective offices to support and be supportive of getting services for people affected by both.
Well, let's start with Eric, because you're once again the Director of Operations of Resurrecting Lives Foundation. Tell us more about that.
Well, Resurrecting Lives Foundation, the founder, Dr. Chris Ann Gordon, she's the one that actually founded this organization. You know, we like to say that our organization, we're very narrow and very deep. We want to focus mainly on those veterans from the OAF and Iraqi Freedom, and OIF, sorry, tongue-tied. And, but we want to focus on those that have those traumatic brain injuries, to try to help develop those protocols, assist in passing legislation and things like that, to assist those veterans so they can get back out and start living a normal life again. We also have initiated what we call our pilot employment program. We are literally working with, right now, Fort Bragg is where we're kicking it off at. But we're working with Fort Bragg with their transitionary university or transition system down there to take those veterans that have been identified that with traumatic brain injury to come out and actually start working with employers that are literally training their staff to be able to work with with those veterans that have those TBIs, so that they can manage with them, manage their conditions with them.
That's important. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And more in my office, I'm more of a conduit. What I do is people will call my office. There's a lot of wandering souls out there who don't know where to go. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, they find Rick Isbell, who's Veteran Affairs, and they think, oh, I'm calling the VA, or oh, I'm calling this, or I'm calling that. Mm-hmm. You may not get the right place at first, but I'm going to get you to the right place. I've been doing this long enough. I know who to call in Franklin County or who call at the VA. And so being a conduit of information, being a disabled veteran, wearing the boots, I understand what they've had to go through. So when you call my office, I'm like, okay, you may not be in the right place now, but let's try to get you to the right place. Okay. And always let them know that door is never closed. It's not my job. This is, let me get you to the right person. Because I've had too many of those doors slammed in my face when I was that disabled veteran on the other side of the table.
That's important. Now tell us how do veterans get a hold of you when they tend to find you? What phone number do they call?
I'll be glad to give my number. It's 614-645-6504.
Okay.
And you can email me too. I'm good with that too.
Okay, what's your email address?
raisbell@columbus.gov.
Okay. Simple enough, and we hope people will continue to connect with you. Let's talk about employment and how you tend to get some of the veterans back into the world of work and the work that you're doing with employers. How does that work? What are some of the challenges that people affected by PTSD and TBI are having when it comes to getting back into the world of work?
Well, first off, I think what's really important is what he said is the networking side of the house. When it comes to this type of work, there are so many different organizations out there and so many other things that it can be overwhelming. Okay. It really can be. So it's not necessarily the information that it's being able to know where to go get that information at. And that's what we try to do. That was one of the largest issues that I had when I came out of the Marine Corps from day one, you're constantly being told what you do, where you go, how you're going to do it. And this kind of evolves into that person that you become the person that, you start telling other people what they need to do. And this evolves over time, 10, 15, 20 years, Well, a lot of these guys, they're not spending 10, 15, 20 years. Spend an average 24 months, 36 months, if they even make it through that whole 4-year program before they get wounded or something, some injury takes place. So they come out here and into the civilian sector, and it's like, where do I go from here? What do I do now? Mm-hmm. I went through the program down at whatever base I left at for a couple of weeks or whatever it may be, but now here I am out in the civilian sector, and I really don't know where to go. I really don't know what to do. I don't know who I need to call. What's my next move? Us at Resurrecting Lives, that's what we're trying to kind of prevent. We want to nullify that entire transition period. We don't want to see veterans sitting around for 10, 15 months trying to figure out what to do. We literally want to get down there, work with Fort Bragg, work with the leadership and staff down there. And this is going to carry on and have a national footprint at some point. Well, we want to literally get down there, decide exactly who it is, and not just TBI. We're talking veterans all. We will specialize in TBI. Doesn't necessarily mean the other organizations that we work with also will do that, though.
Right. A nice network.
Well, let me ask you this, though, with employers. Are you finding, is there any pushback? Because, if this is, well, we don't want somebody who's got TBI or PTSD or whatever it is. Do you get that pushback or have trouble, placing some of the, or connecting some of, the veterans with gainful employment?
I haven't personally had, any actual issues with that, but I have heard that conversation before. We don't want to hire somebody that's going to come in here and may be detrimental to our, to our job or to our business, or may affect production or whatever it may be. I say right off the bat that these veterans have skills that you cannot receive anywhere else.
Right.
You know, honor, courage, commitment, time management, things like this. They had issues.
Loyalty.
Loyalty. I mean, I could go on and on.
Yeah.
You know, the leadership skills that they've acquired, things that you just cannot learn anywhere else but in the military.
You got to get past stigma.
Right, you've got to get past that stigma of, you know, hey, these guys have issues now, so they're going to bring that into my workforce. You know, there are a lot of systems out there that are set up, you know, to work with veterans so that they can get through their issues or get through their problems, so that they can go out and be effective employers or employees.
Is there any incentives to hire veterans? I would think that you know we have these people and men and women who have gone out and been in the war and supported the effort and in multiple different ways. Is there an incentive to say, hey, you know, these are our veterans. Here's
We
X,
wanna
Y, and Z.
support them.
Yes, we should hire them. Is there incentives out there to help with that?
I am aware of some incentives that are out there right now. I don't know exactly, I don't know if
I
you
can
can
answer to
touch
some
on
of
that.
I used to work for the state helping vets get jobs and employment before I came here.
Okay.
And there are some tax incentives that are if you hire a disabled veteran, if you hire, say, someone that was incarcerated as a veteran, there's also tax incentives for that. I know there's some new laws been passed into being lately. I'm not sure what the incentive is on those, but there are some smaller incentives. Plus, there was a conglomeration of businesses that said, yes, we're going to hire 10,000 veterans by this time frame. Chase is doing a great job with that. What is it? Cardinal Health,
Cardinal Health.
outstanding group of people and what they do for their vets and our military people.
Okay, that's really important. And I think, Eric, that it was really important that you said this group of people bring a set of skills to the table that you can't really find anywhere else.
It's really hard to replicate some of the training that they receive.
Right.
Right.
You know, and the time and dedication that they put into it to receive that.
Right. With a veteran, you're going to get someone that shows up on time, that someone's going to work until the job's done, that pretty much can take on the project or whatever you're doing, and will assess the situation, try to do the best job they possibly can.
So tell us a little bit more about why you do what you do, because I think I've heard that you have a story and it's pretty incredible.
I do what I do is because I am, yes, a disabled veteran. I was in the first Gulf War. I became sick after that. Didn't know what was wrong with me. They took me to several different hospitals. It was an intestinal problem, intestinal disease called ulcerative colitis. Was the severest possible. They couldn't stop bleeding. I was on all sorts of medications, and they finally said, okay, here's your situation. You can live like you're living, or we can cut out the problem. So I went with cutting out the problem. So I just have small intestines. I've learned to adapt, and I didn't accept the fact I was going to be disabled 100% as a 24-year-old person. And so my fight was to be able to take care of my family and to be able to work again. And when I did that, that was one of the biggest goals and one of the best things that ever happened to me. I was able to rehabilitate myself, get back in the workforce, and help veterans.
Wow. So you have resilience like no other.
No, there's a lot more people that had it a lot worse than I do. My story pales in comparison to some of the things that people have had to go through.
Wow.
I'm just glad that I'm able to make it through and be able to help others.
I think it speaks to the commitment and the resilience, and we're hearing this as what these veterans bring to the table, and overcoming against all odds. I mean, they're overcoming it and making a big impact in the workforce, but also as you speak about making sure that your family's taken care of.
Right.
So I think that says just a lot.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
We're really proud of
no
both
doubt.
of you for being able to overcome and for the service that you're giving. Tell us a little bit about the journey that your families had, because I think that's when it comes to PTSD and TBI, the families are the ones that end up doing a lot of ancillary support, and they too don't know where to go. So how have you seen support for families be able to play into your respective roles?
You want to go first?
Well, I mean, I think the family is probably one of the most important aspects of the rehabilitation. My personal experience, my wife and my family, they're really the ones that made me, get back to where I needed to be. They're the ones that were able to track and keep things moving forward. So And I've noticed a huge difference between those veterans that come out that don't have that support system, opposed to those that do. You know, that hopelessness, especially when it comes to the post-traumatic stress disorder and the TBI. You know, they need that additional assistance. So the family's extremely important to the health care, I think, of the veterans.
Yeah, and without that family support, I know I would be a totally different person.
Right.
I was blessed the fact that where they brought me to Wright-Patterson, just so happened to be close to where my parents were. So my folks, we had to drive from California to here for me to have my operations, and my folks were there to help. My wife was there and ever so supportive. And you know, native California moving to Ohio, that's not a nice thing. But had they not been there for me, had they not been there for me, I'd be a totally different person. And not as well adjusted or have a goal or a reason that I needed to bring myself forward.
So can then resurrecting lives, can that be that, is this the group that wraps their hands and hearts around those veterans who don't have that support like you talk about, or are there other groups that do that? Because I can see that this could be a gap, you know, that you know, what does the veteran do who doesn't have the family at home?
Well, that's why we want to try to utilize you know, not reinvent the wheel, utilize those resources that are already there.
Right.
We work closely with AMVETS, the American Legion, heavily with the American Legion, the Disabled American Veterans. Okay. These are people that are already in place that do this job already. The problem is that most veterans either aren't aware of them or they don't take advantage of it. Exactly. Right. That's exactly the word I'm looking for. They don't take advantage of it. With Resurrecting Lives, what we want to do is we want to integrate these services into our program, at least on the side with the traumatic brain injury, and utilize them as mentors. I mean, we plan to get these veterans that we work with memberships to the American Legion, the AMVETS. You know, the American Legion is heavy in the rural areas where we tend to see a lot of these veterans kind of fall to the wayside. Because they don't have that support system.
Well, also when I think about traumatic brain injuries and post-traumatic stress disorder, it reminds me that the cognition is an important factor that tends to go. If your brain is injured, you really can't think and you can't do a lot of those processing functions.
Right.
And when you're traumatized, cognition starts to shut down. So even if we leave you with a packet in that 2-week debrief that you get, you know, we can give you a bag full of stuff and go, hey, call these people. Actually, that's not really going to work.
No.
Right.
And that's why they do. They need that helping hand, somebody to kind of show them the way, which, I mean, really is not that far from what they were receiving while they were in the military. We're just trying to kind of replicate that system, you know, as they move out into the civilian sector.
So do you anticipate, what kind of legislative changes do you think needs to be made in order to make that comprehensive service be more long-term? Because it sounds like if they stuck with you for another 6 or 8 months, you know, once you get back, they keep with you every day or something. So is there legislation that needs to change?
I can answer some of that. What we need to do is have Department of Defense and the VA speak to each other.
Okay.
We have 2 sets of rules here. We have 2 sets of files, 2 sets of codes. So the code that I have as a disabled Air Force person and the code I have as a VA person are 2 different things. And they don't meet.
So have you seen, so you've got the new VA Secretary, Robert McDonald, the former CEO of Procter & Gamble, who's very committed to making change. Do you see any trickle down yet, or are you hoping to get an appointment with him?
He was actually supposed to be here tomorrow at the VA, and unfortunately they had to change that. He'll be here probably in April.
Okay.
But what we're hoping to see, and I did get to speak to one of his persons and made some suggestions, but some of that should be is, okay, if I'm injured in the military, as a Marine, as an Air Force person, as a Navy person, whomever, that information should be right here and it should port right over to the VA.
Okay.
They should be able to see your records right away and have it waiting for you. So if I do come home and say, I need some help, boom, let's pull you up. Let's see what you've got. How can we help you?
Sounds like we should have a Kaizen event with a little Lean Six Sigma in there to make those processes streamlined.
Right.
Well,
and why can't you let the providers back home know? Hey, we've got Johnny coming home and he's only got 1 leg. How can we help him get him to his appointments? He's got some traumatic brain injury. We need to remind him of his appointments. How do we help him get into employment after he rehabilitates? And we also need to stop thinking about that there is a cure for this.
Right.
This is a long-term disability that we need to take care of and be cognizant of.
What happens if we do nothing? What happens if we kind of just stay where we are and the processes remain the same?
Then you're going to have, instead of 22 people killing themselves a day, 22 veterans killing themselves a day, it's going to be 40 and then 50. And then hopefully, you know, I guess in a way they'll just, kill themselves all off until we don't have to worry about that concerns, you know, about those issues anymore.
Well,
that is a very, I mean, that's the first time I heard you say that. So you're saying that 22 veterans kill themselves a day.
It works out to about 22 a day.
That
22
is
a day.
22 too many.
That's 22
That
too many,
is
exactly.
22 too many.
So,
So
that's why we need to get
upsetting.
involved.
So, well, speaking of involvement, how can people get more involved with what you're doing? And I'm sure you know, things don't happen, you know, on a Women of Prayer. And how can they get involved, whether it be physically or with resources? How can someone do that?
I would think, honestly, I think the best way that they can get involved is to get involved with, you know, the American Legions, get involved with the AMVET centers, get involved with the VA. If you know of a veteran that needs assistance, you know, speak to them, you know, get them involved with Resurrecting. Have them go to our website. Have them go to the ADA or veterans websites.
What's your website?
Resurrectinglives.org is our website.
Is there a phone number?
There's a phone number on there. There's a number on there, or an area that you can donate also. For fundraising and things like that.
Well, you know, I can also attest to some of the great things that have happened with our National Guard here locally, or actually statewide. National Guard has broken the state up into 6 parts. And what they do is called family readiness. So you may be
Family readiness
right
centers.
here in Whitehall drilling, but you live in Youngstown. So having a welcome home ceremony here is not going to help your family back in Youngstown.
Right.
So by breaking it down into areas, those areas can help themselves. So in the case of one soldier that was just sent overseas, the storm that blew through here and blew off his roof, we couldn't help him here in central Ohio, but we could help him up north. And so businesses from up north, which was part of this coalition, kind of a one-stop shop, that area reached out to those businesses and they put his roof back on for free. So his wife, who was pulling her hair out, not knowing what to do with her kids, they helped her out, and a local hotel put them up, and then volunteers came to show up. So here's another way to volunteer. You get with the local family readiness, and you go to their monthly meetings, and you hear from the military members, the veterans groups, the businesses. They all come together and they start talking about how they help. So I can find, oh wow, you're doing the same thing I'm doing? Well, why don't we team up? Or, I didn't know you did that. Here's where all the aha moments start happening, and people start listening and try to help. That's how I found out, you know, oh, I can send someone over there. So I put it on my list. Okay, next time someone calls me and needs that help, I'll send them here.
So anybody can get engaged, no matter, you know, how small or what have you, whether it's the helping to put the roof on and/or some resources financially to donate to those agencies that are doing some great work to help out.
And they can put in a little elbow grease. Well, we'd certainly like to thank both of you for being with us. What amazing work that you're doing. We're so glad that you made it. Glad that you made it.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your service and your continued service. And a reminder to our viewing audience that everyone you meet is fighting a battle that you know nothing about. So be kind, be generous, and be aware of one another, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
That was great.
We'll be right back.